Good morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you're watching this. We're trying something a little different at the Viva Fry Rumble channel at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Pre-recorded interview that we record live and publish later, except we are recording it live now within the locals community so that anybody who wants to participate, watch in real time, comment in real time, and get your questions in during the actual live interview can do so at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. If you don't know who the guest for today is, you're going to know afterwards. I'm sure many of you have heard the story because it's a story that defies, is the word defies credulity? It makes you think that you're living in a bizarro upside down universe. The story of a woman bodybuilder up in Canada who competes in bodybuilding, or I shouldn't say bodybuilding, but weightlifting events. We'll get the details on the types of events. I'm not that well versed in that type of stuff. Sport. But it's a female. And I'm not even going to qualify her as a biological female, as if we live in a world where we have to qualify what type of female we're talking about. Are we talking about a biological female or a man with gender dysphoria who identifies in his own mind as a woman, which is all fine and well, to the extent that that man doesn't get to come in and compete in women's sports, crush women's records, and destroy the dreams that aspiring female athletes had to compete at the highest level and to win and succeed on their own merits, on their own skill and biology, without having to be defeated by, I'm not even going to call him a biological man, a man. And April Hutchinson is one of the people who, there's been a few stories of this where you can't get over the insanity of it. Riley Gaines was the other. Taylor, the skateboarder, is another. April Hutchinson will tell her story, but she was suspended by the bodybuilding union for 2 years for complaining about the fact that a man who has been a man all his life decided to compete in women's bodybuilding and smash the existing women's records. That's the intro. But April Hutchinson has her own Genesis story as well. If you've never listened to a podcast, we're going to get into it because I've listened to a few and I know her story and I know some of the questions that I have that may or may not have been asked and answered in prior interviews, because it's an amazing Genesis story which explains or attenuates or exacerbates the absolute injustice of this story of political correctness gone insane. So without further intro, I shall be bringing in April Hutchinson. If you haven't met her, you're going to meet her and you're going to know her now. April, how goes the battle?
It's still going, but thank you so much for having me today.
Well, first of all, my pleasure. It's been a while. I know, there's a lot of there's too many stories of injustice to cover, and there's so many that are just so flipping insane. Nobody's going to believe it. For those who are meeting you for the first time, give them the 30,000-foot overview, elevator pitch as to who you are, and then we're going to dive into childhood up until present.
Yeah, so just to kind of correct you on, I wish I was a bodybuilder, but I'm actually a powerlifter. So I'm a 3-time former Team Canada powerlifter. And so what powerlifting is basically just 3 lifts. It's the bench, it's the squat, and it's the deadlift. So I was on Team Canada for 3 times in a row. And during my last year in powerlifting, that's when I actually found out that I had to actually compete. I found actually a male that was competing in powerlifting that I had to compete against, that basically the Canadian Powerlifting Union had no idea that there was a male competing. So I discovered this male, and this is where the story comes in, is that I divulged this information to the union, and then I got basically suspended for divulging this information. So that's who I am. I'm a former Team Canada powerlifter, and yeah, so I can dive into the details of my childhood after that.
Yeah, well, no, we'll get. So I mean, it's even more absurd because I shouldn't have said bodybuilding. Sort of like there's a subjective element to it. Powerlifting is pretty objective. It's who can powerlift it's weights, and so there's no real room for subjectivity in it. Okay, that's amazing. Now, if we could, because I think the Genesis story does attenuate the importance that powerlifting had in your life. For those who don't know, I mean, and I know you've talked about it on other podcasts, and I will not pry, but I think it's important. Like, you're born and raised in Canada?
Yeah, I was born in Toronto, Ontario, and I My father was a police officer and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. I had a pretty normal childhood. I mean, I wouldn't say super normal, but I was born into athletics at a very young age. I was always an athlete, and born and raised in Canada.
And your father was a police officer. How many siblings do you have?
I have an older brother, and again, actually, he's a lawyer. He's a corporate lawyer in Toronto. And again, he was very athletic. We were both kind of pushed into athletics. I was power skating at the age of 5. My brother was always on team sports. My father was always the coach of every kind of sport that I got into. I was like, I had very good, like, I mean, back then, a police officer job wasn't like, the best job in the world. My father worked a lot of long hours. I wouldn't say my father was very present in the home. My mother raised me, but my dad was always working overtime. So he wasn't present as a kind of like a model in the home environment. But I know he did work a lot of hours to give me, my mother, the money so that I could play the sports, right? So.
And did your parents, did they split up or did they stay together?
Actually, my parents were together for 30 years before my mom passed away from brain cancer when I was 25 years old. So they were very much a great couple, loving parents. But yeah, my mom, who was actually my best friend growing up my whole life, passed away when I was 25.
And so you born and raised in Toronto, you grew up in Toronto as well?
I actually moved to London, Ontario when I was 6 years old. And London has always been my hometown. That's where I live today. And I love London, Ontario. I probably will never leave here until I retire. But that's basically where I found my roots in sports. And London, Ontario has been great to me, but that's actually where my this is where the whole story, this is where the onion kind of gets the layers. And this is where I experienced my trauma, where everything where it made the person who I am today, and actually why I got really deep into sports, where I experienced my trauma and how I got down the path, actually got into my addiction and how I recovered. And we can kind of dive into that.
Yeah, because I don't think, I mean, look, I didn't know of your Genesis story, like what made you who you are, until I listened to a couple of podcasts. Whereas, originally you say it's just a story of injustice where a woman is literally having her dreams and aspirations destroyed by a mediocre man who decides to compete in women's sports. Mm-hmm. How you discovered the man was a man, we're going to get into as well. But I won't pry into the nature of the trauma. I just know that you mentioned it in another podcast. So what does happen in terms of childhood trauma leading to what I know was alcoholism that landed you in a hospital for attempted suicide, and finding mm-hmm. your purpose in life through powerlifting?
Yeah, and I've told this story. I think it's very important for me to tell this story. This is why I do travel across Canada, because I don't want people to think that I'm some like scorned athlete that just was like, oh God, I have to compete against a man. I can't compete now. I was suspended. Oh, I'm going to lose medals. That's not who I am. My story has many levels that I hope I share it because I want it to actually help a lot of people on different levels, whether it's overcoming addiction or overcoming sexual abuse trauma. So when I was 6 years old and I was playing sports, like I said, I was sexually abused by my neighbor for a number of 2 years. This was someone I trusted, who I played games with, and he sexually abused me. He would take me into his trailer. Each time that he would take me in there, the sexual abuse got worse and worse and worse, until the last event that it was just, I don't have to get into the details of what he actually did to me, but it scared me so much that I went to my parents and I told them what happened. And I was obviously taken to the hospital. The police came. Everything was taken care of. But after that, I was obviously sexualized as a child. I was exposed to sex. And after that happened, I actually wanted to become a little boy. And I didn't realize this until all of this, I guess what David Menzies would call it on Rebel News, the transanity that came out, because. And I remember I was on Megan Murphy's podcast and I just started crying about it because I thought it triggered something in me. And I went back to my childhood and I remember thinking, wow, I was a little boy from the time I was 6 up into puberty. I cut my hair off short. I was wearing hoodies. I was hanging out with the little boys. I so desperately wanted to become a little boy because I didn't want men to touch me ever again. And I mean, even just talking to you about this makes me teary-eyed because I thought that was my little brain trying to protect myself, because I just didn't want to get hurt again. I didn't want to be touched. And this is why I'm such an advocate, not just for sports, but because I just know, I will say this again and again, there's no such thing as a trans child, because there's a lot of kids out there with sexual trauma. There's a lot of kids out there with bad parents, bad home environments. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I grew up in a very volatile, very not my, there was a lot of yelling and stuff like that. So for me to, so when I actually went through up until puberty, wanting to be a little boy, I actually started using alcohol as a way to suppress those awkward feelings. So because I started developing and I thought, oh my God, boys are now looking at me because I'm developing, right? I was, remember my mom buying me a training bra and I was like, oh my God, I hate this. I remember throwing my training bra into the fireplace because I didn't want anything to do with femininity. Getting my period was horrific. That was probably the worst time in my life, getting my period, because I thought I'm turning into a woman and men are going to want to sleep with me. My friends who are boys are either going to want to sleep with me or they're just not going to want to hang out with me because I'm turning into a woman. Even to this day right now, I'm still a tomboy, but I can still put a dress on and put some lipstick on and look feminine, but I still have a very hard time grasping the feminine side of myself. I never wanted to have children because I still have a hard time grasping that nurturing feminine kind of part of me. So I never had children. So, and I mean, I've been seeing a therapist ever since I was a teenager. So that's something I still work on, So unfortunately, when I hit 10 years old, I was stealing liquor from my father's liquor cabinet. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was a full-fledged alcoholic. I entered my first rehab when I was 20 years old. And I probably saw 5 rehabs by the time I was 27 years old. And of course, like I told you, I lost my mother when I was 25. So that just put more fuel onto the fire for my drinking, which even got worse. And when I say alcoholic, I mean, I was drinking every single day. Like I needed it. It was my medicine. I needed it to survive. Now, during this time, I guess you could call me a functioning alcoholic because I still held down a job. I had a very good, high-paying job for 20 years. I was still playing sports. And guess what? I was excelling in sports. I was always the team captain. I was doing very well. So I kind of feel that if I wasn't playing sports all that time, I surely probably would have died earlier than I would have gotten really sick, basically. So it wasn't until, we're talking not too long ago, 2018. So think about it, 7 years, how long? Yeah, 7 years ago, that I had tried to quit drinking on my own because my doctor gave me a death sentence. She's like, April, if you can't quit drinking, you're now older. I was drinking about 4 liters of wine plus vodka on top of that. My skin was gray. My liver was shutting down. I couldn't walk maybe 10 feet without projectile vomiting. And she said, if you don't quit drinking, you're going to die within a year. So I basically tried to wean myself off. I couldn't do it. The withdrawal was horrible. I mean, we all know that you can die from alcohol withdrawal. So I couldn't do it by myself. So I overdosed on vodka and pills. And obviously I didn't succeed. And I woke up in the ICU unit on a breathing tube. And at that point, I woke up and I basically had a decision to make. I could either live or I could either die. And I chose to live. And I basically checked myself into rehab. And September 2019, I came out of rehab, and that's my dry date. That's basically, I've been sober ever since. So I'll have 6 years sobriety coming up September. And when I came out of rehab, I started powerlifting. And that's when the story begins.
If I may ask one question, because you mentioned something earlier about like cutting your hair from 6 to 12 to be a boy, so that people to avoid the fear of someone touching again, and it's not a glib thing. Like, people say it on the internet that a lot of these celebrity actresses, when they have their mental breaks, the first thing they do is chop off their hair. And then a lot of people say it's a method, a self-protection mechanism to not be attractive, as though that's what the sexual abuse was based on, to your abusers. Do you remember your actual thought process at the time? Like, I do remember the way I thought when I was a kid with respect to certain things. Do you actually recall that was your mental process, coping mechanism at the time?
Yes, I remember that exactly, because I remember doing the same things to my Barbie. I cut my Barbie's hair off too. I gave her a buzz cut. I cut all my Barbie's hair off too, doing the exact same thing, and thinking that I didn't want Ken to hurt Barbie. Like, it was, yeah, exactly. Remember my hair was short. I remember the clothing I would wear. I just didn't want to be attractive, and I didn't want boys to be looking at me. I really wanted to be merging in with the boys. I wanted to be a boy. But again, like that, you just didn't think about what's happening now. That wasn't happening back then, right? So, yeah.
And we're definitely this will naturally circle back to that, because a lot of people also do say that, this whole trans movement deliberately focuses on children who are suffering trauma, children who are on the spectrum, easily manipulated children, and that it's a form of exploitation on its own, set aside the underlying issues that might make a little boy think he's a girl, or a little girl think that she wants to be a boy. If I may, did the neighbor go to jail?
So the neighbor that did that to me actually was just shy of his 18th birthday. So my father, being a police officer at the time, so now I would never speak ill will of my father. God bless him. I love him very much. I'm very close to my father. So growing up with my father, and I think my father being on the drug force, and doing the job that he was doing, was very stressful. I mean, he did drink a fair bit, and he would yell a lot. He was not abusive, like he would not hit us and stuff, but there was always alcohol around. So I was a little afraid of my dad growing up. So when I reported this incident, I obviously went to my mom. My mom took me to the hospital, and the police were called. So when the police came over, I hid under my bed and I was crying, because I thought I did something wrong. I thought I was going to get spanked. I thought, oh my God, the police are there for me. It was all my fault. The police came. I'd never talked to the police. My dad handled it, but the CAS, Children's Aid Society, came over, and they dealt with the parents of, his name is Tom, went over and dealt with it. So, but what I did later on, before I turned 16, is I had to dig up all the files, all the police reports, all the medical reports, and I actually took him to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. So I did do something more civilly against him. So, and he had to pay, I think it was $10,000. So I did get that. So he didn't go to jail, but because he was under 18, unfortunately. I mean, but
no, I know it's just a question of like,
yeah,
when something like this happens to someone, I don't know how they go through their lives, knowing that the person's out there, and that there will never be any form of justice, even if they had gone to jail. But this is Canada, and all right.
yeah.
And I don't want to know more about the individual, but okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, so that will explain the importance of powerlifting to you at a spiritual level, and we're going to come back to the recovery and AA part of it. You get out. So you get out of the hospital 2019. That's your day of sobriety, September 2019, and then you get into powerlifting. And I, firm believer that life is about addictions, and you have to just substitute the unhealthy addictions for the healthy addictions. Would it be an overstatement to say that powerlifting became something of an addiction, just one that is actually building your body as opposed to one that's destroying your body?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think when I was in rehab and I came out, I was talking to my doctor about this, and she says it's not unlikely. I mean, it's not uncommon for obviously just to have cross addictions, right? And I mean, I I mean, like many, I think I have obviously OCD. I mean, it's not. I mean, I think everyone kind of has a form of OCD, anyways. And I think I just basically, yeah, I obsessed about powerlifting, and I feel like all the damage I did to my body was just like me saying like, oh my god, like I actually got obsessed with like not just powerlifting, but just the way I was eating. Like I eat like a super clean diet. Like I kind of went overboard with supplements, right? I was like, oh my God, I have to like redo all the damage I did to my body with all and I find it crazy, but like I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes. When I went into rehab, I actually forgot that I smoked cigarettes. Like I mentally just checked out. And like when I came out and I smelled someone smoking a cigarette, I was like, oh, that's terrible, that smell. I was like, wow, I actually smoked cigarettes. It came back to me, right? So it's like I just totally had a lobotomy when I went in there. And so yeah, no, I basically made powerlifting my new addiction because I was training 2 hours a day, almost every day. Now that was right before COVID hit. So when I came out, I trained at a gym for about a month, and then they all of a sudden closed down all the gyms. So I was freaking out. I was like, what am I going to do? This is my new thing that's going to help me stay sober. So luckily, my coach at the time actually made his own home gym at home in his garage. So I was actually really lucky. So for 2 years, I trained in his garage, and I had no competitions. I don't know what it was like. I don't know if you moved in the States by that
No,
time
no,
or
I spent it all in Quebec. So we were under like
oh,
a 5.5 month curfew in the first year, 2021, and then another month and a half in 2022. Yeah, no, and this is stuff that I was talking about back in the day, and I got massive more exposure to the real stories of this in Ottawa, where people who couldn't go to their AA meetings, people who were
yeah,
addicts, who all of a sudden shut out of society, like the level of overdose, which I'm sure they will never qualify as suicide because it would make the stats look horrible, through the roof.
yeah.
And it's something that people don't understand, don't appreciate, and certainly will never talk about. And you're lucky in that you found a proper outlet, and others fell back into addiction, and many died as a result.
Well, exactly. So I know, and that it makes me sad because I mean, not sad, but I was so grateful because if I didn't get help or if I didn't get sober, I surely would have died because I would have drank myself in my apartment during COVID because I literally just got sober a couple months before COVID hit. Because I remember seeing those lineups at the LCBO, and I was just like I said, I couldn't walk 10 feet without having a seizure or vomiting. So for me, getting sober and then being able to go to my coach's garage, like that was awesome. Like I was just like, wow, like I actually had something to go to every day. Like I actually was one of the ones I was thankful that I was able to work. Like I wasn't working up until rehab. I actually landed a job and I was actually able to work full time. I was able to train. It was actually a great time for me, besides the fact that I couldn't go to a competition. So I didn't even know what a competition looked like. I was just hearing about, oh, wow, these competitions are happening in powerlifting, but I've never been to one. So after 2 years of training, I just got hella strong. Like I was just building my my body and I was eating. And then when I came out, my first competition was actually called Centrals, which that's not how you actually do it. You usually do like a local comp and you work your way up. But since they missed so much, I got gold medal at Centrals. I went right to Nationals. I got gold medal. I went right to Worlds. Like that's unheard of. So I actually got fourth place at Worlds for my first time in my first year. And I got the deadlift, like I got the North American deadlift record. I still hold that title right now. So it's like
Look, everyone in my community knows I always ask how old people are, and I'm not going to ask because I know it's on the internet. But you're older than me, and you look. I mean, first of all, I realized it clicked. You remind me a little bit of Linda Hamilton from Terminator 2.
yeah,
If you've
people have
never
said
gotten that
that.
before, I've never asked this of a woman before, but I think it's appropriate under the circumstances. I need to know your physique. How tall are you? How much do you weigh? In order to better understand the records that you hold.
So currently right now I'm five, I've shrunk a little bit. I'm like 5'10", And you want to know my age, you said?
No, you're right. I think you're 49 if the internet's correct, right?
I'm turning 49 in April.
All right,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And I don't even know the weight, but powerlifting goes by weight category, right? Like you have weight classes?
Yeah, so when I got my North American deadlift record, I was 45 and my highest deadlift is 510 pounds. And my highest squat is 420. And my bench, we don't talk about my bench. My highest bench is 210. But
the deadlift is 525. What does that involve? I won't be able to pull up a video now. I might try while you're
so
talking.
that's like Eddie Hall?
Yes, but for those who don't, tell the world who he is.
So he was like the strongest. He was like the strongest man because the deadlift is the one you literally pick up from the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like so it's the one you just literally pick up from the ground.
So if I ever need transportation of a 500-pound body or two 250-pound bodies, I know who to call. So, and if I may ask, also, what was your physique what were you looking like when you came out of rehab? Because you're in the hospital, you come out. I don't know if I don't know when the last time you exercised was. Just for the purposes of appreciating the physical transformation from, the D-Day to Victory Day.
So when I came out of rehab, I was probably about 175 pounds. I've always had a little bit of muscle just because of my years of playing sports. So I was about 175, 180. I wouldn't say I was fit at that time. And then when I came out of training, I was always monitoring myself. I was doing the bod pods to monitor my muscle mass. I went up to close to 205. That's how much muscle, not just muscle, but I gained about 10 pounds of muscle. It was crazy. I was looking pretty jacked. I was looking pretty good. And for your viewers too, keep in mind, I was also in a tested federation. So you're not allowed to use any performance enhancing drugs, nothing.
Like testosterone?
Nothing like that. So there are federations that I could have gone into, but I'm very against, and I did get tested at Worlds as well. And that's where I did my, and that was funny because I got 4th place. Because they were even probably wondering, wow, who's this girl that just came out of nowhere for her first time and lifted the highest, the guy was over 500 for my deadlift. But also, and it was funny because I got whisked off stage right after. And I was like, who are you? And they're like, oh, we're here to test you. And they take you into this hotel room and they make you pee in front of them and stuff. And I was crying, right? I was bawling my eyes out. And I was like, I took a caffeine pill. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was freaking out because I took double caffeine pills and I always drink the rock stars and stuff. And they're like, because I thought I took too much caffeine. They're like, no, it's okay. Caffeine's allowed.
That is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But they're looking for other stuff, right? And I was just like,
well, the irony is that they'd be looking for the stuff that's naturally occurring in a man, which we're going to get to in a sec. So you do 2 years of training during COVID, no competitions. You get out and you start kicking ass in your first competitions.
Yeah.
When I don't need to know the guy's name, but when does the man enter the picture and how? Because I know the story, but for those who don't, it's going to be interesting.
So I'll just say the first name is Anne, but I mean, because everyone knows who this person is. Who's been following. So Anne basically surfaced because I was actually friends with Anne during my years of training during COVID, because no one could meet face to face. So Anne was actually my friend during on Facebook because we had a powerlifting community page and we would chit chat, and Anne approached me and said, oh, I really I love your lifting. You're really good. Do you have any tips for me? So I'd actually say yeah, you should start wearing a belt and equipment. It would really help you because Anne wasn't wearing a belt when he lifted and all this stuff. And so we were chatting. We're actually friends. And so one day we were chatting about Laura Hubbard going to the Olympics. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they're letting a man go through to the Olympics this year. That's totally unfair. What are they thinking? We're just doing small chat. And I always knew Anne looked different. Anne would always refer to himself as a she boy, not to be I just thought Anne was like maybe like a lesbian, or like just maybe like they would say like a dykey lesbian. I don't know. Like I just whatever. And then the one day Anne said, "Well, you know that I'm a male, don't you?" And I said, "Well, no. How would I know that?" I said, "You've been taking gold medals in the women's category. You've been competing for 2 years, taking gold medal. Like, am I missing something here?" And I said, "Well, how far do you plan on competing?" And he's like, "Well, I want to go to the nationals. I'd like to go to worlds." And I said, "Well, if you do, then I will speak up about it because that's completely unfair to females." And then he blocked and deleted me on Facebook. So I couldn't talk any further with him. So I basically sat there with that information for a week. Like I didn't say anything to anyone. And I didn't even I don't even think I told my fiance at the time. And so I just basically sat there and I didn't feel good about it. So I actually started compiling a letter to my federation, just kind of saying like, "Hey, did you know that this powerlifter came to me and said that they were male?" And then I wrote all the harms and stuff like that about like competing against men. Like I was just like, not just the physical harms, but there's also like a lot of mental stuff. Like, us having to compete and we constantly lose, like we have to overtrain. We're also in a tested federation. Like I just said, like I got tested for, PEDs, but then we're okay to go against a male. Like, and by the way, this male also went through full blown what's the word? Puberty, like transitioned after. Yeah.
Well, I gotta, ask. It's so outlandish. PEDs is performance enhancing drugs for those who may not know.
Sorry.
It's so absurd because I would imagine any female taking testosterone would be immediately disqualified. The testosterone would be against the rules.
Well, and also I'll just let the viewers know, like if I was going through menopause or something like that, if I want to take hormone replacement therapy or something to assist me because I'm having problems with menopause, I need to actually get a TUE, like an exemption pass from my doctor and actually present it to my federation saying, "Oh, is it okay?" But these guys are okay just to do whatever, just to waltz in. But anyways, I presented this letter and they ignored me. They just ignored my 2-page letter. I didn't get a response. And I sent it to the president. I sent it to the vice president. I sent it to 5 board members, and not one of them even said, "Thank you for the letter, April." So I went to my social media and I started posting stuff like, "Keep men out of women's sports, save women's sports." And I actually got an email that got their attention, and they sent me an email saying that goes against our code of ethics. You can't say that. That's hate speech. And I was like, wow, are you kidding me? Like, and I didn't say anyone's name. I didn't tag anyone. It was just basically me sharing stuff that Riley Gaines posts, stuff like that, right?
I got to ask, and it will be what I refer to as motivated reasoning, because one way or the other, I'm going to find a reason to blame whoever they are based on their sex. The people of the board that you brought their attention to, are they men or are they women?
So the board that I had to go against is perhaps it's privately funded. So this is the problem. Privately funded, and it's comprised of a mix of men and women. The president is basically, I've had screenshots of conversations that he's had with people, and we've caught him saying something like, "Oh, just be quiet. It's easier to be quiet. We'll lose funding if we say something." One of the members actually has a queer child that's powerlifting. It's all like they've posted stuff on their own open accounts that says, "We support trans lifters." Like I was kind of set up to lose fighting this board to begin with. It's kind of like, like Amy Ham, right? Like she was going against a privately funded, like kind of like a woke board.
I love it. It's a man who, a coward man who doesn't suffer as a result of this because he's not a woman in the women's league who has to compete against a man.
Yeah.
And it's other people who, if they are impacted by it, get more value from the virtue signaling than from fighting the injustice. If I may ask, I don't care anything about Anne's identity, Anne in quotes. Do you know how far along he had gone in transition? Like, did he still, was he intact? It's like we're talking like, and did he have a penis? Like, does he still have a penis?
I don't know. I can't say for certain if Anne has one or not. I wouldn't want to say yes or no because I'm not sure. All I know is that Anne did say that he did transition after the age of 20. So
after full puberty, after full bone density, full heart development, as if this is another one where I'll say it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you go through puberty, it's unfair, and if you start sterilizing children before they go through puberty, it's a crime against humanity. So
yeah, and I will say about Anne is that I just want to note this because I did mention this, and I don't know if you saw my Megyn Kelly interview, but Anne, when Anne did compete, and Anne was called out on this, and from the beginning when he knew he was competing against women, in the beginning was making fun of women for being weak. So when I make statements about Anne being a male in women's powerlifting and being a narcissistic male, I do stand by that statement because Anne from day one has made fun of women being weak on bench press. There's a reel, or I guess a video. Like, I mean, Anne had an open Instagram account making fun of women and just how weak we are. Anne also made death threats numerous times, actually against myself and Daniel Smith. I actually had to call the Calgary police against Anne because Anne was basically saying that myself and Daniel Smith should die a slow, painful death because we hated trans people, but just because we were forming legislation to protect the female category, even though we made a category for trans identifying athletes as well. I mean, there was numerous times where he was just lashing out, a very unhinged individual, put it that way. He eventually got suspended for 6 months for his behavior by the Canadian Powerlifting Union, but pales in comparison to my 2-year suspension. But
so you call out this male competing in women's sports. How was Anne doing competing wise? Crushing women's records, from what I understand.
Oh, so yeah. So so after I put those things out and I got a warning about my hate speech for saying save women's sports, I then went on to Pierce Morgan. So this was when I got suspended because Anne actually took and still holds 3 out of the 5 records in Alberta for powerlifting in the women's category. So Anne holds the bench, the deadlift, and I believe the squat, maybe not the squat record, but he does hold 3 out of the 5 records. You can look them up on the website.
And what is the differential between his record and the prior record?
Oh, it's like astronomical. I think like the bench record itself, I think his bench is like 350. So you imagine a bench. Oh, but the best part is 4 out of the 5 records in Alberta for the women's powerlifting are held by men. So I don't know if you remember the Team Canada male coach that went in to make a mockery because remember Zuby? He went in and crushed it with the deadlift. So we had a Team Canada coach his name is Avi Silverberg. He actually went in. He changed his ID to show that he was female. So this is how easy it is to go into our union. He put his ID showing that he was female. He walked into a powerlifting competition in Alberta to a bench-only competition. And the funniest part is, well, it's not really funny, Anne was actually the handler at the competition. He waltzed in and took the bench record away from Anne. So now 4 out of the 5 records are held by men. So Avi, who's a great Team Canada coach, he was doing this to show how ridiculous this trans inclusion policy is, took the bench record away from Anne. So now, I mean, it's not funny. This is just, it's a South Park.
It's South Park, because I remember this. This was when Anne then put out a video that said, it's not fair because I'm sincere. I'm sincere in my trans identifying ideology. He's not. People actually like me. People don't like him. I remember that video at the time.
So there we go. Okay, there's the mentality. And so this is why so now we have 4 of the 5 records in Alberta held by men. And so I went on to Pierce Morgan and I said, Anne just crushed the records. And I basically said that, so you ask how well Anne is doing. Anne is currently ranked #1 in the world for the women's powerlifting category for the masters. So I'm a master lifter because I'm between 40 and 50. Anne is currently ranked #1 in the world still, and still holds all the records in Alberta. So I basically stated on Pierce Morgan that Anne is a man. Anne is a 6-foot man. I mean, all you have to do is look at Anne's build. And I got suspended for 2 years for calling Anne a man. I didn't call Anne a woman, like, basically the Canadian Powerlifting Union wants me to. And I got suspended for 2 years because, obviously they don't recognize that bodies compete in sports, not identities, which is, we're talking about sports and biology, but, they wanted me to bend the knee and,
April, it is nothing shy of absolute Orwellian insanity. 4 of the 5 Alberta records are held by, call it biological men. They're held by men in the women's category. And you get suspended for going on Pierce Morgan and referring to Anne as the chromosome man that he is, who went through puberty, who lived all of his muscle density, heart, lung capacity development as the man boy that God made him. And you get suspended for 2 years. Now people can appreciate what this could have been in terms of a devastating blow to your life, given what you've gone through to get to where you are, to achieve the level of excellence where you're at, and to have it all stolen from you by a corrupt, cowardly, virtue signaling organization and a narcissist of a human that goes in and takes pleasure out of beating women and claiming their trophies.
Yeah.
I've talked myself into a rage. I'll talk myself out of it. What
it is, and it is maddening. And that's why, like, it's funny how it's not funny, but it's happening in Alberta, which is the province where Danielle Smith has actually made legislation, right, to protect the female category. And all along, all we have asked for is to have a separate category. And that's for these last 3 years, that's all I've been advocating for. And I mean, I've been working with Riley Gaines. I've been working with Dr. Linda Blade here in Canada. God bless her. She's like my bestie. Like, we've been working hard here in Canada. I'm literally currently, I don't know if you know that, really the only, besides Linda Blade, the only athlete that has been speaking out about this. I mean, there has been tons behind the scenes that obviously thank me, behind the scenes and emails, but no one really like being vocal about it, right? I mean, hopefully, obviously I sell my t-shirts, people walk around and wear them. That's awesome. But I mean, I do see some turnaround happening. I mean, people are just sick of it. I mean, especially fathers of little girls getting into sports. It's unsafe, as we know. Yeah,
it's insane. There's no other way. You're living in an asylum up in Canada, and there's no other way to explain it. It's an asylum that's been taken over by the inmates. I'm only asking this because I know that I can, because I need to know out of curiosity. What's your body fat? You measure your body fat percentage and all these things. Like, I don't know how you determine muscle mass. Like, I'm only thinking selfishly. I'm a very small man. Well, I'm 5'5.5", maybe 5'6" on a good day. But I weigh 158. But like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's your body fat percentage to muscle mass ratio? Because
I think it to stand beside you at the Rebel Live thing. I was only. You were on stage and I was like below, so you seem so tall.
Oh yeah, and when I took that side by side with RFK, everyone's like, either RFK is a giant or Viva is a midget, and it's a little bit of both. But like, no.
I would have wanted to pick you up.
In our locals community, I said, ask some questions. Someone said, can she deadlift you? I was like, yeah, me and another one of me.
Oh my God, I would have loved to pick you up. I love picking up little.
Rock me like a baby.
It's funny. David Menzies, I might do this. I might, because I'm like one of these people. I just never injure myself. I'm injury free my whole life. I don't know if you know Will Tennyson. He's a famous YouTuber, but I did an arm wrestle competition with him. I could have. We held our arm wrestle for like a good 5 minutes, and I injured my shoulder because he was really trying, and he's a big bodybuilder, but that's the only time I ever injured myself. But David Menzies wants me to get into wrestling, and I might do it. So for women's wrestling,
Well,
but
I'll tell you, I'm actually a surprisingly good arm wrestler, specifically with my right arm. So I'll take you up on that challenge, and I don't mind getting beaten by a girl. I have no. I mean, I'm saying that tongue in cheek because your arms look substantial, but I outperform in arm wrestling because nobody anticipates that I would actually be that strong. I used to do wrestling also, which is where it's interesting.
You'd be good.
Well, I was good. I was always muscular as a kid, but I was always wrestling in the 150 category, which always had like people 3 years my age. People come to you and they don't understand analogies and they don't understand comparisons. And they say, why are you complaining about a biological male who transitioned when you, as a physical specimen, have advantages that other females don't that allow you to win? At the risk of asking the absurd question, I mean, how do you respond to such stupidity that I'm sure you face on a daily basis?
Wait, repeat that question over.
I've heard people say to you and about you, how dare you complain about a male, biological male who's transitioned when you're a physical specimen that you were gifted by God with your physical attributes, and but for God, you could be a skinny girl who wouldn't compete and wouldn't win. What do you say about those who say the difference between women is the argument for allowing biological men into the category?
So wait, okay, so people, because of my stature and because of my build and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, they argue, like, first of all, there are weight categories in powerlifting, correct?
Yeah, there's weight categories. So I'm at the highest weight category. Yeah, but I mean,
Okay.
so that's their argument is because look at my build.
Well, my response to them is always like, there are weight categories, so you don't allow someone of your stature to go, deadlift or powerlift against someone who's 50 pounds lighter. You don't allow the Mike Tysons to go fight against the Manny Pacquiao's, or who am I thinking of, Floyd Mayweather's. The fact that people don't understand that even within these sports, there are, for reasons of safety and fairness, categories that don't warrant allowing XYs to compete against XXs when they've gone through puberty. It's like, I don't think. Go for it.
Yeah, but there's just so much difference between. But if you took like a man, like with my so equal to me, like say if you took, I always said this, if you took someone like my height but this male, and like we both started in the gym together at the same day, right? We both started training. A man's just gonna outlift me. Like men are
every day of the week.
A man is just bigger, faster, stronger. Like I used to, for fun, when I was a kid, I used to be the fastest girl. I used to be the sprinter. I used to excel in every sport. I used to come home with those ribbons. I was the best athlete all the time. But for shits and giggles, guess what was fun? Oh, let's put April against the fastest male runner. And we used to line up at recess, and I used to go and I used to try to beat that boy. But guess what? I lost every time. Yes, I work hard. I'm an athletic woman. But again, if you put a man and a woman in a gym with no training experience, and you both train at the same time, and a man's always going to be the one that they're going to. Like, it's just.
But I mean, the issue is, like, I mean, I guess to have to explain that to people is you're trying to explain up is up and down is down to someone who just refuses to believe it. And people always, they retort to me, Ronda Rousey could kick my ass, and she could. But I'm not an elite athlete. If you take,
but she trained, like that's her specialty. She's also spent, like, that's like me. All my coworkers say all the men, like they're like, oh, you can outlift me, blah blah blah. But I've also, like, people don't understand powerlifting. You work up to that weight. I just didn't walk into the gym and lift 500 pounds. I also did like periodization. Like, you work up to that, right? And it's also 4 years of training to get up to that. Like, it's just like.
It is absurd because they're not comparing comparables, where it's like, yeah, Ronda Rousey could kick my ass. There is no fighter at a professional level who is in Ronda Rousey's weight category that she would be able to beat, save and except for getting struck by lightning or something.
Well, and also too, remember, there's a lifter who I idolize. Her name is Jessica Bittner. So I'm what, 49 now. I could never lift as much as Jessica Bittner. She's also in the 69 kilogram weight class. So she's way smaller than me, but she's also 28 years old. She lifts way more than me. She lifts like 100 pounds more than me on the deadlift. Like, her deadlift's almost like 600 pounds. Like,
That's amazing.
so that's what there we have age weight. So I'm older. I'm not going to lift as much as a 28-year-old, and she weighs like 100 pounds less than, like way less than me. So again, you have weight classes, age classes. So yeah.
Your 2-year suspension, is it over?
Oh yeah. So so after I got suspended, and because I got suspended, I actually went to the International Powerlifting Federation. So that's the federation that does the nationals and the worlds. And the president actually heard my voice and he agreed with me. So he actually changed the policy. So Anne, who wanted to go through to the nationals, couldn't get through because he changed the policy to testosterone monitoring, which, you know what, that's not really a great policy. 2.4 nanomoles, which is whatever, people could pass that. But he also changed the policy to that Anne had to submit his medical records. And he refused to do that because a lot of these, trans identifying individuals, they don't have a diagnosis from a doctor. They basically need to have that on paper saying that they suffer from gender dysphoria or this and that. They also need to be monitored for a year prior, and they also need continuous monitoring. Well, Anne did not provide that. So therefore, Anne was disqualified. So I don't know where Anne is today. I don't know if, well, obviously Anne got suspended for 6 months, but they did change the policy. That's why I do stress to people that you should speak up, you should use your voice, because since I have spoken up, I've had that policy changed. And I've also had some other smaller policies changed just in different organizations because I've spoken up just about certain things. And my suspension was reduced to 1 year because I actually hired a human rights lawyer and I actually fought it. So it got reduced to 1 year.
Who was your human rights lawyer, if I may ask? Are you allowed to mention his name?
Lisa Bildy.
Okay. It's funny. Whenever I think human rights, I know of, Julius Gray out of Quebec, who takes the notorious cases out of Quebec and sometimes broader Canada. So your victory is having your bullshit suspension reduced to 1 year instead of 2. That's your the cherry on your cake.
My victory, honestly, was getting suspended. To be honest, my victory was getting worldwide recognition. My victory is that I would do that all over again in a heartbeat, because I think it's sad that people don't speak up. And I could have gone back after my suspension, but I actually, the Canadian Powerlifting Union still lets men compete at a local level. So there's no way I would go back and watch a little girl lose to a boy or any woman lose to a man, because that would be me saying, you know what, I'm okay with that. And, I just want to go back and get my Team Canada placement again and win a gold medal. So to me, integrity means more than anything else. So I'm good with that. And I'm walking away and I'm doing, like right now, as you know, I'm working more on a political level. I was at the legislature with Danielle Smith. I was out in British Columbia with John Rustad when he introduced the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. I was out in BC. I've been traveling around Canada, spreading my message, working on a political level. And that's important to me, because that's where change is going to happen. So.
No, and absolutely. And that's what we are getting into in the next one. But I want to highlight something that I didn't fully appreciate until listening to a couple of your interviews. Everyone appreciates the devastation, the what's the word I'm looking for? Discouragement that comes from a girl having to compete against a boy and lose. It's like, why even do it? I'm going to go, piss off and do something that's going to be less healthy for me. That I think everybody can understand. What I don't think everybody actually appreciates or is sensitized to is what it can do in a more immediate injury sense, in terms of forcing women who want to compete against men to overtrain, to physically hurt themselves, to injure themselves, or the temptation to go do performance enhancing drugs. Because there's no way to do it fairly without cheating in order to get back the fairness that was unfairly taken away from them with a biological male who's gone through. So flesh that out, because I don't think that people fully appreciate not just the discouragement aspect, but the self-harm aspect.
That's exactly, you're bang on, because that was what my letter stated, was not just the physical harm. So take, my sport's individual, so I didn't actually have to compete. Like, I'm not in a sport, like a team group, right? So, but I did say the harms are mental, right? So as we know, even Joe Rogan talks about this. To be at the best at a sport, you need to be obsessed, right? So you got that OCD aspect. So, you know, you have to train almost every day. You're obsessed to be number one, right? I've been like that my whole life. So, you know, to compete against a man, yeah, you're going to be overtraining. You're going to be straining your ligaments, your muscles. You're going to be injuring yourself, right? And like I said, I was in a tested federation. So of course you're going to have like, you know, I talk about Jessica Bittner, right? She's always been like the gold medalist in powerlifting. Imagine if she had to compete against a man, what's going to go through her head to use PEDs. And now that puts her integrity at risk. It puts everything at risk. It puts her name. You know, a lot of high level athletes, even Olympic athletes, are very like they deal with depression, suicidal thoughts because they want to be that gold medalist podium spots. We're losing sponsorships. We're losing prize money. Like it affects you, like not going to that, you know, getting those sponsorships and the scholarships is huge, right? So I mean, it's a mental thing. It's almost as harming as a physical thing, right? So.
Well, that's going to bring us into the political side of it, and I know that I've been going very hard on Pierre Poilievre, and I think call it out of love or call it out of disappointment. It's a question of perspective. I appreciate that you are, well, if it's not a conservative government that's at least going to put the brakes on the liberal madness, maybe we can even hope that, you know, Pierre adopts a bit of the Danielle Smith level of pushback. We'll see. What are your concerns heading into this election, and what are your hopes and aspirations for Pierre picking up the ball instead of, as far as I'm concerned, continuing to fumble it?
I know he's getting this. Well, I mean, I just I'm really pushing on obviously my concerns, which are the war on women right now and children, because you know, I don't just talk about the sports aspects of it all. Obviously, what happened to me as a child. And, you know, I don't just talk about the harms of men invading our sports, but I also talk about our spaces. And that's about keeping men out of our prison systems, keeping men out of our bathrooms, our locker rooms. I know currently right now where I live in London, Ontario, and I have called these shelters, the women abuse shelters, as that there are men being housed in with the women that have been abused. I've literally called them. And when they pick up that phone, they actually are protecting the men more so than the women. The trans women are being protected than the actual women that are being raped or abused. And that's pretty sad. So, I mean, and I'm also big on protecting the children. So keeping actually men out of the women's bathrooms where children are going, and also the harms of puberty blockers. So I know that, you know, policy number 102 on the conservative side is going to be, and it states right there that they want to keep men out of women's sports and spaces. I might as well just wear a t-shirt that says policy number 102, and I'm going to hold Pierre to that. I'm not sitting here and saying like, oh my God, Pierre is just gonna be awesome. When he gets in, this is what's gonna happen. I mean, when, and I'm gonna be speaking positive here, when Pierre gets in, we're gonna be holding him accountable. It's not just gonna be like, okay, that's gonna happen. There's gonna be a campaign and we're gonna be holding them accountable. So, I mean, I firmly believe that there's gonna be some major changes and Pierre's the man to do it. I guess the reason why I'm not pumping up the People's Party is because, I mean, I don't want to, because it's a race between liberals and Pierre right now. So,
and April, just so you know, I've never told anybody who to vote for. I've just told them what they are if they vote for a liberal, an idiot. Period. Full stop.
Oh God.
From your perspective, like, people haven't talked about it. I haven't heard Pierre talking about this particular issue, which I think is an important issue. But the only question is whether or not he thinks it's not popular enough or unpopular enough in Canada not to talk about right now.
So I work a lot with, I mean, I worked out in British Columbia, I worked in Alberta. I've been helping the Conservatives here in my city, right? And I've talked to a lot of MPs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we both know it's all about strategy. I know for a fact, and you know that, but I guess we can't drill it in Pierre's head to say, we know if Pierre came out today and said, keep men out of women's sports. That is a slam dunk issue. 98% people across the board support that. He would get so much praise. He would get so much support. I think the polls, I mean, I don't believe in the polls per se, right? Like I just don't believe them. They would go, they would just skyrocket. You know, that he would get, it would just be great if he could say that. But they're just so, even with John Rustad, like when he was doing his election out there, he left the gender ideology stuff to the very end. It was like 2 days before voting day, and he actually started touching about the indoctrination stuff, right?
It's too little too late at that point.
Exactly. They just don't want to touch it. But behind the scenes, like anyone I'm talking to at these campaign offices and the MPs, they're like, oh yeah, they're all on board. They're all like saying like keep men and women's sports. There's only 2 genders. I mean, I know many people, even when I met Pierre at the rally, he shook my hand, and I'm pretty sure he knows who I am. He recognized me. I did have my Keep Female Sports Female hoodie on. And he's like, yeah, female sports are for females only. He's on the page. He has said it to many people. I mean, he said it last Christmas, right before Christmas, that with that the guy that murdered his family. He's like, when I become PM, I will keep men out of women's prisons. Like, you know,
that's the Quebec case. I talked about that one.
Yeah.
When the news outlet referred to him as a her, a woman who killed her wife, I think, and her, it was, it's just, I have a bit of despair for the state of Canada, because it's true. If Pierre, and if he's watching, and if someone clips this and snips this, if Pierre were to come out and say, no women, no men in women's sports, no men in women's locker rooms, no puberty blockers for children, it would be, the Liberals would feign outrage and say, look, it's Trump 2.0. The everyday Canadian would say, my goodness, thank you for finally saying it and finding your courage. I will not use a crass expression, for finding your courage, Pierre. And he just won't do it as of yet. There's a month left, but you do it 3 days before.
I don't know. I'm not going to say definitely that he won't say it. He might, again, he has a month left. He could come out and say it. I just feel they're kind of waiting to see how things are going to go. I have faith that he might come out and say it. I know right now the reason why they're not saying it, because honestly, I hear people whispering, like I get people saying, oh no, it's strategy right now. It's strategy. We don't want to be attacked by the left. We can't say anything right now. We just don't want to get attacked. Someone said that he had a picture taken with someone wearing a sweatshirt that said keep men out of women's spaces, and they got so hammered by the left. It wasn't good for, I don't know, but
no, that's it. I talked about it in yesterday's intro rant, but like it's amazing. He's letting himself get browbeaten into submitting to the left's tactics by the negative press, which he's going to get anyhow.
But he does need to get on. Like, I agree with everyone. Like, I think that's why he's posting more photos of him and his family, because he is trying to connect. He's trying to connect with viewers that he's like a real, like I said, I said this a long time ago. He needs to show, like, his rallies are kick ass. Like, he's hitting like 3,000 to 4,000. Like, there's a huge one in Toronto happening on Friday. It's probably going to hit 5,000. People, but he needs to show like his vulnerable side, because people love that, right? This is why we have podcasts, right? Because people like, look at me, look what I'm sharing. We need to see his vulnerable side. People need to connect. We want to know that he's like not some phony politician. Like, we need to connect, and that's why I think he's showing more of his family photos and stuff like that, his kids. I mean,
I've gotten very cynical when they do that, and not. I would rather see a 2-hour podcast than see family. Every, especially, I don't really like politicians using their kids as
little normal. But I think, like, I don't know, like, I've suggested, like, I have a connection that knows Pierre, and I said to him, like, let's get him on some podcasts. I'm like, does he not know that? Like, he knows that, so we'll see. Like, everyone's saying, oh, let's get him on to Joe Rogan. So I don't know if that's a good one to get him on.
He could have started with PBD, but I would just like to see him, I'm going to use the expression, grow a pair and actually start saying the things that everyday Canadians truly believe, and be damned with what the media is going to say anyhow. There are only 2 sexes, no boys and girls sports, no boys and girl locker rooms, no puberty blockers for children. And then, my goodness,
Yeah.
I would the markets would shift in a heartbeat. Are you competing anywhere now, or are you not competing anymore?
No, so you're asking me like about my size and stuff. So when I was powerlifting, I was 230 pounds.
That's
So,
that's a lot of muscle. I'm like, holy crap!
well, no. So it's so it's funny. So my coach that I had when I was powerlifting, like I didn't realize how big I was getting. So like I said, I'm a tall girl and I was really jacked. Like I was like, so not just, so I think about it, I was powerlifting 4 times a week. Like I was lifting super heavy. Like think about it, I was doing paused deadlifts. So that's like bringing up the weight to my knees and pausing it at my knees. I was lifting like 420 pounds just to my knees and pausing it there, then bringing it up. So that's not just like, I was doing crazy work. And then I was doing accessory work on top of that. So that was mean I was doing like a lot of like the bodybuilding stuff. And I was told my boyfriend at the time, I said, make sure, because I do a lot of photo shoots too, right? Like I do like a lot of modeling things. And I actually, I'll tell your viewers too, by the way, this is why I turned this suspension into a blessing. It's like, this is why I say, please speak out and use your voice about things, because I've turned it into just a great thing. I started my own apparel line, which I sell these hoodies, I sell on my website. So if you're too afraid to speak out, you can always be a walking billboard, because like Billboard Chris. and I've been sponsored. So people would think like, oh, you know, she probably gets hate mail every day. No, I actually got sponsored by 3 amazing companies. I'm with XXXY Athletics in the States. I'm with like a skincare line. I'm actually with a huge supplement company. So because they believe in me, and they actually weren't like, oh, well, we just like your look. We're like, we like what you stand for. You stand for truth and you stand for integrity, and we like that about you. So this is why we want to sponsor you. So yeah.
Fantastic. Plus, look, at some point, it's good to stay in shape. I don't think lifting 500 pounds is good for anybody's back.
No,
And
it's
after
not good for your body after a while. So like, I was just like, but again, I'm so lucky I don't have any injuries. But now so I lost 50 pounds. I actually did the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Do you know, you must know Jordan Peterson and the
Yeah, for sure,
Petersons.
for sure.
So Tammy Peterson, I talked to her. I'm really good friends with her. So I was like, so I went on the carnivore diet for a while, and I lost 50 pounds. And
Over
it just,
over what period of time? 50 pounds.
oh,
3 months?
no, I'd say like 8 months.
Okay. That's
And
a
it just
lot.
came off me. Like I honestly, I just cut out all sugar. I mean, I was carnivore, and then I started doing modified carnivore. So I basically, I needed my vegetables because I just love vegetables. My fiance was like, "Oh yeah, I love meat, butter, and eggs." I'm like, "Oh God, gross! I just can't do that every day." So I started doing like vegetables, and like I love to cook too. So and now I simply. And then I started adding in, now I do more like a bodybuilder. I'll have like Japanese potato or jasmine rice every other day when I lift heavy, like if I lift weights, like in the gym. But now I'm just like, now I weigh like 185. So I went from 232 down to 185, and I'm just like nice and lean. And I like it. And I feel great. I'm more energetic. And now I'm into pickleball and like.
Pickleball. Yeah, I've heard that's the sport of the future.
It's so good.
I've seen people play pickleball. I don't like playing team sports anymore. I just like jogging and biking and trying to disconnect from the world, but it never happens. April, I got some questions. This is the benefit of
Sure.
the vivabarneslaw.locals.com live community. Just a few questions if you can do
Sure.
this. Svi Hansis asks, what was your hardest competition and why?
My hardest competition was probably in well, so first of all, I never had to compete against Anne because that would have been my hardest one, but I boycotted. So I stepped off the stage and I said I would refuse to. So I never did compete against them. I boycotted. That would have been the hardest one. But my hardest one to compete in was in Panama City. It was in August. So think about how hot it was. And it was 40 degrees. Oh, I don't know if you guys know degrees, but it was really hella hot. And I think I was just exhausted from the heat. So I basically exhausted. And I mean, I didn't lift nearly how much I normally would. And I was drained. And I remember doing my last deadlift and I almost seizured at the end. And I just remember convulsing. And I think I got like 470 for my deadlift, which was my last deadlift on stage. And I almost passed out. So I think that was the hardest one, was in Panama City, because of the weather.
The amount of videos that I've seen of people doing the deadlift and then dropping it and then face planting because they lose consciousness. Do I say it? I remember a traumatizing image I saw of a man blowing out his colon trying to lift too much. And
it happens. Or puking. People puke. Yeah.
The puking you see all the time. The blowing out of the colon. Luckily, I didn't see the video. I just saw a screen grab. It's like, all right, that's enough internet for today.
But you know what, women, I've never done this, but women pee themselves all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Niagara Falls. They just let it all out. So it's like, and just to watch it, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, wow. And I got so scared. But they're like, usually women that have kids do it more so. But
April, I was going to say, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My mother says like I held on to her bladder on the way out. So my mother would too much information. I think the chat already knows. My mother will always pee a little bit, dribble when she laughs too much. And so when we were kids, we would make her laugh, and she's like, "Stop it! You're gonna make me pee." And then we would continue to make her laugh, and she'd run off to the bathroom, and we would all make her laugh on the way so that she would pee herself. That was the gift that the 5th child gives. Yeah, peeing is less embarrassing than pooing, for example. I presume that happens as well, which has just got to be embarrassing. Hold on. Finboy Slick has a tip question. Let me see this one. I think I saw it before. Finboy Slick says, "I'd pay good money to watch you lift Viva, April. In fact, I just did. So the next time you see him, consider it a contractual obligation." We got the TT full-timer says, "Politicians have no moral compass and zero courage, whichever way the wind blows, and it cannot result in a single criticism." And then we got the Roostang says, "Viva, please ask your brother or the other authority about the entire Canadian legal system policy having been rewritten to support LGBTQ plus language, he, her, it, etc., coupled with severe penalties for lawyers who violate the new language code." Yeah, it's I'm not optimistic for Canada, but I just wasn't as pessimistic as I was until Pierre hasn't done anything to stand up against the madness that Canadians, everyday Canadians, sane Canadians, are just hope on hope that he actually does.
Well, I hope he repeals Bill C-16. That's the first agenda, I hope.
Now hold on a second. Which one was Bill C-16? Because
well, that's what caused. I mean, of this.
That's the Jordan Peterson compelled speech one. The problem is, April, the Conservatives voted unanimously to support the conversion therapy ban. So how can they come out now and sort of take a position diametrically opposed?
Yeah, but Bill C-16 was also what's caused all this, like allowing men into our spaces, because it's now protected identity. So not only does it protect sex, I mean, it always protected sex, but now it's like gender you identify. Yeah.
It's insanity. Anybody who's not in Canada doesn't know. Sue Hansen says maybe she should consider running as MP. This is the question that everybody who gets mildly political gets. And any potential thought of entering that hellhole that is the world of politics?
I would like to, but unfortunately, I don't think I would be qualified, because for the amount of stuff that I post online. I mean, you should see my posts; they're pretty out there. Like today, I posted today is supposed to be Trans Day of Visibility, and it's me. I call it. It's Men with Fetish Day. Like they're not going to take someone like me.
You'd be surprised. I think I might have dropped a few too many F-bombs or retard bombs on Twitter, and I dipped my toe in it. It's a corrupt hellhole. But today is, as of the time of shooting this, Trans Day of Visibility, and apparently here Roostang over in our local community says, "Viva, have you seen this on X? Picture's worth 1,000 words." It's Rachel Gilmore saying it's Trans Visibility today, Day of Visibility today, and we're in an election campaign. I'll definitely be watching to see who mentioned trans folks' rights and who doesn't. And then she says, "AK, what does it say? Better watch out." Rachel Gilmore's watching. It's crazy. I just hope. I'm not optimistic. I'm actually getting very, very pessimistic and almost despaired with the state of politics in Canada. Danielle Smith is the only reasonably conservative in Canada, and I don't even care about the label. Just standing up for good common sense and getting again, attacked and maligned by the media. And so I think Pierre Poilievre was like, well, I'll play it safe and not say anything, and everyone's going to know what's in my heart of hearts, even though that's not going to be the case.
Well, that's why. Sorry, you have another question?
No. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, no, I was going to say back to the other guy's quote on about politicians not having any balls, basically. That's like, what do you think about Doug Ford? Because I mean, I know Rebel News has brought this up many times, is that like I unfortunately voted for Doug Ford because I vote conservative. Now,
progressive. For those who don't understand, Doug Ford is a so-called progressive conservative. It's like a flat mountain, a jumbo shrimp, a smart liberal, progressive conservative. Sorry, no, I just want to add that caveat. Carry on.
And he basically, I met him 2 years ago, and I was with the education minister, Jill Dunlop from Ontario. And I told him, because I was wearing this shirt, and he goes, "Oh, what does that mean?" I was like, "Wow, really? You don't understand this?" And so I basically said, well, I told him my story, and he shook my hand. He said, "Oh, I have daughters. I believe in what you stand for. I totally agree with you." So I was like, great. So I took my picture taken with him, and I basically wrote him a letter last year that I've been waiting to send to him. And I attached our photo together. I also attached my photo with me and Danielle Smith, and then me with the sports minister in Alberta when we passed the bills. And I said, like, I would like to basically set up a meeting with you because you're so on board with what I had to tell you that day. I said, let's talk about implementing that in Ontario. So, but then all of a sudden this stuff with the tariffs came along. And so I was like, oh crap, this is not a good time to talk to him about this. But then I kept seeing some stuff like he's supporting Carney. And then I was like, oh God, this is horrible. Like he's literally just, I call him flip-flop Ford. But I said this all along, that whoever wins the election, like if Pierre wins, he's just going to turn into like a conservative. Basically, he's just going to follow where the funding is. But I mean, I don't know. I'm still going to send him that letter because Danielle Smith's team did say that if he ignores my letter, that they will set up a meeting with me, with Ford, that I could sit down and talk to him about this. I mean, I'm not going to touch the spaces topic with him. That's too much, because I do know back in 2018, he did state that he wasn't going to touch the gender ideology topic. He wasn't going to touch it. Now, that was 5 years ago. So, I mean, things have changed, but I do think he will at least talk to me about the sports issue at the very least. But if Carney wins, I don't even think he'll sit down and talk to me, to be honest.
Our Encryptus, who's our real-time Jamie, put in the private chat, said, fact check, 80% of all people do not want men in women's sports. 94% conservative, 67% liberals, 64% independent. But I wanted to see in Canada, let me see here, for whatever this is worth, I'm just pulling it up real quick. It's an older article. By a 4-1 margin, Canadians believe transgender athletes' participation in women's sports is unfair, according to an MLI poll, which stands for McDonald Laurier Institute.
Yeah, that's like the best site you can get all the information from. It's legit. It's the best site. That's where I get a lot of my studies from. Yeah.
At the risk of making the crass joke that Pierre might find his cojones and take a stance that Canadians believe in, maybe he'll find his courage come April 1st. Maybe he can make the statement on April 1st, and if he gets too much flack, he can just say it was an April Fool's joke. Yeah. April, I'm going to put up all your links in the pinned comment, but tell people where they can find you and how they can support what you're doing.
Yeah, so the best place is basically just my website, because there you can basically support me by donating to my advocacy, and all those funds just go towards like my travel fund, basically, so I can travel around Canada and kind of spread the word, do my talks. Or you can buy a t-shirt. We have hoodies. I also have like political t-shirts there too. I have ball caps and mugs and stuff like that. So it's www.aprilhutchinson.com. I'm also on Twitter too. So
April Hutchinson. There's an N in there. It's not Hutchinson.
Hutchinson.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And I'll put it up there so everybody can find it. April, it's been revelatory. It's been amazing. If I go back to the asylum, I'll be sure to DM you and we'll meet up and you can powerlift me. Or
I definitely want to. Yeah.
You can come to the free state of Florida.
I'm sure we'll see each other again somewhere. So I do regret not lifting you up. So,
I'm actually seeing a perfect merge here. What's it called when two people, a collaboration? There's a fishing place called Blacktip H, and they have they have like muscle men try to catch groupers, and so there might be a crossover opportunity there. I'm one step away. If you don't know who Blacktip H is, it's a great fishing channel, but they're awesome. April,
I will come down to Florida. Just invite me down to Florida, and I'm there because I need a holiday.
You are invited, and we'll do a follow up. Maybe we do it either before or after the election. We do a follow up in person at the local studio. Done and done. April, stick around. We will say our proper goodbyes. I'm going to end transmission, and locals, I will see you this afternoon. I'm going to go do my daily stream at 4:00 in a couple of hours, as at the time of recording this. But everybody, April, follow, and thank you all for being here. Godspeed, peeps. Peace out.